And we should now be live. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Are you able to hear me properly and see everything? Like, I don't know exactly if you can. This is kind of an impromptu stream. I saw this video that will be up on the screen. It's going black because I'm alt-tabbing into other things. And I figured I would do some sort of response. If you could get people's attention by putting this on Discord or placing this on Twitter and atting everyone, you know, all that stuff, that would be very much appreciated. I'd also ask that nobody insults the guy, and we will proceed through. Hi, I'm not Gandalf. Hi, Henry Summerfield. How is everyone doing this day? Also, we'll play a little bit here. So basically, I think we know from the title of the stream what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about this fellow here, who is an atheist, and he's going to be asking why apologists for Christianity don't talk about the Ascension. Now, I think there's actually quite a lot that we can do with this here. I actually put a comment on his thing. I did a very, very long comment if you want to have a look through it at some point. I haven't put the link in the description, though. And I'll basically be, in some sense, I suppose sort of reiterating the comment, but I can't actually remember all of the content of the comment, so I'm just going to be responding to this on the fly. And I'd also like to hear all of your guys. You accidentally said you. I don't get what you mean, Gandalf. We'll go through here. Did I say uwu? Bruh. Yeah, we'll be going through this guy and responding to what he says. Because a lot of his views, like, I find them... Well, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. First of all, I'm going to play this first sentence, and I want you to press 1 if you can hear him, okay?
Why don't apologists ever talk about the Ascension? I've been pretty passionately engaged in Christian apologetics for almost 2 decades. Most of that time as a Christian, and only in the last few years as a non-believer.
Did you hear that, guys? Did you hear this fella? Like, if he was involved in Christian apologetics, you know, actually I probably shouldn't have said that. I have every reason to assume he has. From what experience I've had, he was very much of a Protestant stripe, if I had to guess, just based on the people he refers to. The audio quality is a bit naff. Yeah, it's a bit naff on my end as well. I'm not quite sure why that is. I'm not sure if it's... because I'm going through the stereo version of my headphones on both the video software and on the computer. So I don't know if it's something interfering with it or if it's just the video, but can you at least understand what he's saying, fellas? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. Okay. Let's listen to this guy, and we'll have a bit of an AMA afterwards, because the only videos I've really uploaded recently have been that prayer rule that I uploaded, was it yesterday? I'm also going to be doing a stream on... Settlers Lament's channel tomorrow on Protestantism versus Catholicism, but today I thought I'd just do this. Henry asks, liberal or conservative Protestant theology? I don't know for certain, per se, but some of the arguments he comes out with from certain theologians later on, I would say he's, at least as he views it now, in an extremely theologically liberal position. Like, it's like a lot of the questions I think could be answered by a more conservative view. And the people that he cites as well, like, he goes through, he mentions Mike Lincona, I think his name is. He mentions William Lane Craig, of course, and he mentions Gary Habermas. He doesn't really mention people like Brant Petrie. He doesn't mention Dr. John Bergsma. He doesn't talk about, you know, Scott Hahn. He doesn't talk anybody of the Catholic field. He doesn't talk about the more conservative evangelical sorts of people. Like, I didn't hear him mentioning... you know, actually, I'll leave them out, but... because a lot of the good stuff that they come out with is in the Catholic authors themselves, but he doesn't come out with any of the conservative evangelical theologians, really. Okay. Let's keep going.
But over the years, I've started to notice something about the industry of Christian apologetics, about what defenders of the faith do and don't talk about. And there's one subject in particular that when I first started to question my faith, I couldn't help noticing they almost never talk about. I'm referring, of course, to the Ascension.
Yeah, and I have to say he's right. It isn't really mentioned that much. Now, I think that there's a very good reason for that, and I don't think it's the fact that Christianity is weak on this by any means. To lay my cards on the table right now, I think it's because, well, if you've already got the resurrection, why is ascending into heaven any big deal? Right? But, yeah, we'll let him continue.
But before we talk about that, it's worth pointing out how surprising this is theologically, especially...
Why would it be? I mean, he'll get into that, but I don't think it is by any means. I mean, it says in Psalm 109. We'll actually look through the Hebrew there in a bit, I think.
Considering how much apologists love to talk about the resurrection. I mean, the historical case for the resurrection is pretty obviously one of the evangelical industrial complex's biggest exports, at least when it wants to present itself as an intellect.
Well, there you go, evangelical. But he doesn't respond to some of the more historical evangelical theologians. He simply responds to apologists. And frankly, the thing with a lot of just apologists is that they're not always that good. Right? Like, sometimes you'll have an apologist make a case for a certain doctrine or something that actually leads to, some nasty results, right? So, if you're gonna really... And you know what? It's the same thing with atheism, really, as well. Like, if you're gonna read... like, obviously atheists on the internet aren't the place that you should go for. You should go for Dawkins or somebody like that. Right?
Intellectually robust, evidence-based worldview. There's an
Sorry, what did he say?
As an intellectually robust, evidence-based worldview.
I do agree with him that evangelicalism... I mean, I don't think it survives evidence, but not for the same reasons that he thinks. Like, I mean, the way he's phrasing that, it sounds very scientistic, and I really, this is something that's been bugging me all day. I really, really want to pop some scientisms here. But yeah, I do agree that I don't think you can really consistently be a evangelical Christian if you take the tradition that seriously. Or even scripture. Like, I was actually reading through Ezekiel the other day, and I found a place that seems to be a very explicit affirmation of baptismal regeneration. I think it's in... Okay, so basically there's... Actually, I'll just give a chapter. It's Ezekiel 46. I probably shouldn't have done that, but that's just going to lead to theological arguments. But yeah, if you look in Ezekiel 46, right? That's my scruples playing up, and you look to Ezekiel being led into the water, and you look at the response of the man who's measuring out the temple. He says that you've been renewed, right? Like, it's not just a confession of believership. Like, that's for Baptists, that's not just for general evangelicals, but that's one example where I think you could find baptismal regeneration.
There's an entire cottage industry of large books covering every detail of the evidence for the claim that Jesus rose from the dead, from the empty tomb to all the specific appearances to...
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Summerfield here. Yeah, those are definitely... Yeah, maybe not Dawkins. Like, Dawkins is... Yeah, that's a bit unfair. Like, if you're going to go for someone... watch debates... deal with someone like that, yeah.
Individuals and groups. Except, strangely, for the last appearance. The one we read about in Acts 1. Where Jesus concludes his time on Earth by flying up into the clouds like he's Superman.
Yeah, I was thinking I should have skipped that bit because that's very it's a very derisive way of describing it. But well, it's his video, and I suppose it's mine. I can't really skip that now.
All the talks that have been given on the resurrection, there's a conspicuous silence on the Ascension, which is directly and integrally related to the resurrection.
He has to get up. If you were to take something from Matthew, Jesus says he will be seen walking upon the clouds of heaven. Right? Now, how can he walk upon the clouds of heaven if he's not up there? Like, for example, how can he like go to ascend up and wait for the nations to be put under his footstool if he doesn't somehow do something?
I've combed through several books and listened to dozens of talks by Gary Habermas on his minimal facts argument for the resurrection, and maybe I've just missed it, but I have yet to see or hear him talk about the Ascension. Mike Licona has written one of...
Well, why would he? I mean, like, you've already got the resurrection of the dead. You've got him risen from the dead. You've got him rising Lazarus from the dead. You've got all of these other miracles. And you've got all of the miracles of the saints, including levitation, I might add, in the future. Why would we focus on the Ascension as if it's some sort of greater miracle? It seems to me that it's a lot easier for Jesus to ascend up to heaven than it is, just moving his body, right, up against like what we would understand to be the natural way that a human body behaves, right? That seems a lot easier to me than instantaneously healing somebody who was born blind. With Ascension, all you're doing is moving the body in a certain direction. With healing somebody who's been born blind, you're intrinsically restoring a faculty that they have never had. Or it's like maldeveloped, in an instantaneous fashion. I don't see why we would need to defend the Ascension if we can't defend the other things.
Of the most comprehensive investigations of all the relevant evidence in his 700-page book, The Resurrection of Jesus, and yet the Ascension doesn't even appear in the index. William Lane Craig, in his 1989 book, Assessing the Evidence for the Historicity of the Resurrection, has a detailed discussion of all the other appearances of the risen Jesus, and yet this is what he says about the Ascension. Quote, Luke does refer to the Ascension of Jesus in his Gospel, and this might be called a resurrection appearance, but an investigation of the Ascension is a study all of its own and would not substantially affect the results of our discussion. Therefore, we will not cross the line to include it in this study. Unquote. That's a really strange omission. Actually, the only resurrection apologist I know of who directly addresses the Ascension without visibly squirming is the great British...
Visibly squirming? Like... Okay, so you brought up two who haven't mentioned it, and you brought one who said, this isn't the topic of the book. I wouldn't say it's squirming.
Theologian N.T. Wright, in his books The Resurrection of the Son of God and Surprised by Hope. I might make a video in the future all about Wright's view of the Ascension, if enough people are interested in that, because it's a very interesting and idiosyncratic view. But for this video, I just want to ask the question, why is there such an awkward silence from most apologists on the question of the Ascension? Now, I don't think it's because there's some deliberate conspiracy of silence. I don't think it's intentional at all. Honestly, I think it just comes down to good old-fashioned confirmation bias.
Okay, fam. So let me get this straight, right? We have the Book of Daniel that predicts Jesus' crucifixion, or depending on which interpreter you read, his baptism to the year, right? You have all of these prophecies in the New Testament. You've got all these prophecies in the Old Testament that, like, you break the Old Testament if Jesus doesn't fulfill it, right? Like, Judaism does not have a leg to stand on. It just doesn't work. You have all of these miracles of saints. You have all of this historical content, and you're concerned about Jesus, like ascending. It really seems kind of strange to me that this would even be an issue. Like, once you've dealt with the obviously higher order miracles, like the man coming back from the dead, like God rising from the grave, and once you've dealt with, like I've said, the instantaneous healing. Once you've dealt with things like that, like, it becomes, like, I mean, is it even really a question? Let's see what the comments are saying. Does he have... I don't know, does he? I don't know if he has that in there. I don't know if he has AirPods in there.
I think apologists don't talk about the Ascension because, as central and important as it is
he does!
theologically, from the perspective of the modern historian and from the perspective of modern cosmology, it's just really, really embarrassing.
Is it? Why would it be embarrassing? We're talking about, like Jesus, a man who has died, has been dead in a tomb for 3 days, and he rises from the dead, and we're going to squirm at the fact that a guy ascended into heaven? Really? Like, you can look through history and you can see the people who've ascended, in different ways, You have, reports of St. Padre Pio doing it. You have reports of Saint Joseph of Cupertino. Like, I read one of these critics say that Cupertino, really, they just saw him kind of, like, jumping. Like, you read some of these, like, skeptics trying to deal with these miracles, and they come out with, like, some of the just most implausible things. Right, you have St. Philip Neri doing it. You have St. Alphonsus Liguori doing it. You have, like, there are earlier people as well. There's, like, a Byzantine monk from the 9th century that I've heard that was doing it. Right, like, you don't, like, it's not an uncommon thing for saints to do. And they're in living memory as well. Like Padre Pio, there are people alive who knew him still. There are, there are people who, that's another one, Blessed Seraphim of Sarov, the Emperor of Russia saw him levitating. Like Alexander I. This isn't exactly like, this is the problem with this scientistic worldview, right? You have all of this evidence from history. You even have scientific papers on these sorts of miracles. Like, there's a really interesting one that I found on the healing miracles at Lourdes. You have an entire historiographical study into the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Huge one. And the overwhelming consensus, like, there's only 2 who disagree. Like, is that it's a miraculous thing. I seem to recall hearing that somebody even saw his reflection in the eyes of Our Lady on that tilma. Right? You have all of this stuff going on, and, I know of people personally who have seen miracles that really, actually speaking, are more significant than the levitation. Right? Like, I know a guy at my church who converted, right? He was just probably some sort of New Age kind of, I think he was probably of that ilk. And he got a big bottle of holy water, and he wanted to use it to heal some scars on somebody who knew very well, and it didn't work. And then he decided, that doesn't work. I'll try it on my car, see if it can fix the engine. It didn't work. Now, this was quite a substantial bottle, I'm told. I don't know if he said a litre, but it was substantial enough that he'd used a very decent amount on not only the person's stomach that had scars, but also on his car. And the bottle refilled itself. Like, it just refilled itself, and converted. Nothing else more to say, converted. So, we're dealing, the levitation thing, that's one thing. Like, this guy experienced matter being created out of nothing. We can go on for hours. We can talk about the Eucharistic miracles of Lanciano. Pretending like levitating into heaven is like a big deal when you've got living heart tissue in pieces of what an atheist would probably think was just bread, right? Like, are we supposed to be like intimidated? What are we supposed to make of this ascension thing? Like, Jesus ascends into heaven? Come on, man. Let's have a look at the comments actually. How can he hear the word of God if he has? I think Foyer, Bend and Kuhn would be good reads for this. I'm kind of apprehensive about that sort of view. Like, I do think science can come to legitimate conclusions, but frankly, the sort of rigid scientific worldview a lot of people have, not only is it's like faith in science alone, kind of. Right? You have this scientific falsifiability theory wherein, things are only really known if they're verified by the scientific method. Whatever the scientific method even is. Right, first and foremost. And second of all, that is unfalsifiable in itself. It's like faith in the scientific method alone. Like the problem isn't science. The problem is that you've got, frankly, a lot of very poorly educated scientists who are very good at their individual fields, but they're not very good philosophers. And they need to be good philosophers, because if they're going to talk about categories of being, which is what, things like chemistry do, right? And they're going to talk about laws of the universe, like physics does, right? They need to know what being is first, and that is what philosophy does. You have metaphysics for that. And if you don't have an idea of what being actually is, then you're going to start making errors when it comes to different categories of being. We need these scientific and scientific types to start reading more philosophy. It's as simple as that. And this fellow is one of them, right? As we will see later on. I mean, the mere fact that he thinks that Jesus ascending is like something embarrassing, right? It tells me that, well, first of all, he hasn't really done like all that much reading into Christian history, because this Christian history is replete with this stuff. You have St. Vincent Ferrer, just one guy, commits something like 59,000 miracles, like according to one guy's calculation. Like, even the critically historical Bollardists attributed something ridiculous like 809 or something, right? You have this guy raising like at least 28 people from the dead. There was one instance where there was like a Jewish guy at one of his homilies, and he wasn't happy with him, and the crowd wasn't happy with him either, so he left. And a piece of masonry off the church or the cathedral fell on him and crushed him to death, right? And St. Vincent just calmly walks over to him and raises him from the dead. And the guy says, I was wrong, the religion of the Christians is true. Now, of course, the atheist laughs at this, right? And if this were, if it wasn't the fact that you first of all got lots and lots of sources attributing this sort of thing to this man, right, first and foremost, and second of all, he's not an isolated case. You have loads and loads of these miracles happening, right? Like, you don't get smoke without fire. Are you just, these people, either they're not aware of them, or they're just going to do things like, like they think that St. Joseph of Cupertino was flying because they saw him jump in a funny way. I mean, come on. Like the story of what happened with St. Joseph of Cupertino is he literally got up, jumped, flew over to the local village, picked up a cross that they were trying to put into the ground, picked up the cross, and, without any effort, and just stuck it into the hole they put it there for. Right? They saw him leap, slightly... Sorry, one moment. Sorry, guys. Hopefully you should... Someone called me. You're gonna have to bear with me, fellas. Yeah, someone very dear to me just rang me up. Yeah, she just wanted to chat. Where was I? Yeah, you have all of this stuff happening, and they're just gonna not... They either don't know about it or they're coping for it, basically. Let's continue with what this guy has to say. This is one of the things that frustrates me a little bit about his views.
And it's embarrassing for a few reasons. Looking at the Ascension historically, it just doesn't hold up very well. For one thing, it doesn't carry the crucial indices of early or multiple attestation.
Well, I mean, it's attested in the Gospel of Mark as well. He's going to say, oh, it's only in Acts, or it's only in the Luke corpus, which is Luke and Acts, right? But I went and checked this, and at the very least, it's in the longer ending of Mark as well, so that isn't true.
While there seems to be a clear belief throughout the New Testament that Jesus ascended to heaven in fulfillment of Psalm 110, Luke is actually the only gospel writer, the only writer in the New Testament at all, who gives us an actual account of this event. And
well, I mean, that's not true, right? You have it mentioned at the end of Mark, right? So it happened. You've got two sources there. Just because at the beginning of Acts it goes into more detail, doesn't mean it couldn't be legitimately described by other sources, which is what the longer ending of Mark does.
And that account was written at least half a century after the fact.
Nonsense. And you know why it's nonsense? This is one of those critical things that really, really irritates me, right? They arbitrarily late date these books. Now let us consider Luke and Acts, right? So Acts comes after Luke. Now, I don't think that we can date Acts any later than about the mid-60s AD. And you know why that is? Because it finishes in the middle of Paul's trial and before his martyrdom under Nero. Now, why would somebody exclude this? It seems like a pretty serious piece of information, both Peter and Paul, right? And this ends up forming the basis for Roman primacy. They're martyred. And Acts doesn't mention this. Now, the one response I've heard to this argument is that Luke is this kind of, like, or rather the author of Acts is this Roman apologist, and he omitted it to stop throwing shade on the Romans. But then you've got the same author, if we take it, and I don't see why we should really dispute it. I think there's extremely good evidence, and not only that, traditional attestation, that Luke and Acts are written by the same guy, right? You have attestation in Luke chapter 13 verse 1, where Jesus speaks about Pilate mingling the blood of some Galileans with their sacrifices, right? A horrible act. So, Pilate just sort of lets Jesus get crucified. I don't know if it says that explicitly in Luke off the top of my head. I'd be dead shocked if it isn't. But it's like to say he's like a Roman apologist doesn't make much sense. And it doesn't make much sense that, we're going to be writing in the 80s AD, like the Gospel of Luke and Acts, right? Because Acts comes after Luke. If we look at the beginning of Luke, we see, it's addressed to Theophilus, right? And then we look at the beginning of Acts, and it talks about the previous book, and it mentions Theophilus again, right? They seem to be written by the same author, right? And because one, the Acts acknowledges the previous one, that means that it's probably been almost certainly, basically, written after Luke, right? So, that's dating it that late doesn't really make any sense to me.
In fact, this suggests, just by itself, that Luke might be historicizing or putting into narrative form something the earliest Christians believed for...
Yeah, this is another problem with this whole, like myth thing, right? Like, if I write a history book 50 years after an event, is it necessarily just, like, myth? Or historicizing? If I do my research, if I talk to people who are there, as Luke clearly did, right? How are you going to get the Annunciation narrative without talking to Mary, right? Oh, like in before, like, invention, blah 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 blah. But I don't know why it would need to be invented, right? How do you get this information without talking to these people? You have, like, first-hand stuff, like that. And, like, why would he bother historicizing it? There's no power to be gained by this, really. I'm sure that this guy could come back with some sort of argument, but I don't want to really do the whole canned response of, oh, they weren't making money off of this, they were getting killed en masse for this. But that's true.
For, well, much less historical reasons. It's also embarrassing to the historian, ironically, because it doesn't pass the criteria of embarrassment. It just looks suspiciously convenient. A lot like the Mormon story about Joseph Smith returning the golden plates to the angel Moroni after translating the Book of Mormon. Luke's narrative of the Ascension looks a lot like an ad hoc explanation for why the appearances of the risen.
Well, it adds up with what was said in Matthew, Jesus says to Caiaphas that you will see the Son of Man walking upon the clouds of heaven. Ad hoc? How does someone walk upon the clouds of heaven without being up there? And that itself, it comes from Daniel. Oh, it's so suspiciously convenient. Oh, Jesus doesn't appear anymore.
Jesus ceased with the apostles. It's easy to see how a story like that could have helped reduce the dissonance caused by Jesus' continued absence after the initial flurry of excitement following Easter. but probably the most
Right, okay, so... Okay.
embarrassing aspect of the Ascension is how obviously mythological it is.
Well, as we've already discussed, that's nonsense. That stuff happens all the time.
Because when we read Luke's narrative without any harmonistic or concordist agenda, it seems like it uncritically reflects the three-tiered universe of ancient Near Eastern cosmology.
Oh, here we go.
That is, the view that heaven is literally above our heads and the underworld is literally below our feet. This was the accepted view of the cosmos throughout the...
But the trouble is that doesn't make sense with God. And you know why that is? Because God is said to be in the heavens, yet he never changes. You know, you see God being declared in the heavens repeatedly. He also creates the heavens and the earth as well. Right, first and foremost. Right? God doesn't change in Malachi and in Isaiah. He creates all these things. So, actually, you know what? This is irrelevant.
ancient Near East, and it's the view of the Old Testament traditions that Luke is drawing on. Such as
oh, I see. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember. Yeah, okay, it was relevant. This is part of the comment, right? There's a biblical scholar called Moshe Greenberg who wrote a book on which is kind of accepts a lot of this biblical criticism theory, and I felt it was kind of cringe at times. But he says, you know, definitively, later Judaism believed in creatio ex nihilo, right? So to say that the Jews have this view of the heavens where there's just all these created things about, or rather like one kind of heaven, is just nonsense. God creates the heaven and the earth, right? He will say that, you know, there are some of these theologians that say, well, you could also render it when God was with the heaven and the earth, right? Which reflects more of a platonic view. And I'm not sure I believe that assertion, and that's why I think they have this certain view. I don't think it's true, though. But later on, certainly, you see it in Proverbs. It's explicitly cited by Moshe Greenberg. It's implied by God saying that he never changes, and it's implied by God's name in Exodus, right? I am that I am, right? He's pure being, right? He doesn't change. The heavens clearly change in the Babylonian mythologies, right? You have the creation myth of man, where Marduk kills Kingu and spreads his blood over the earth, and that makes man. Right? You have this cosmic war in the views of the Mesopotamian religious systems, right? It just doesn't exist in the same way in Christianity or in Judaism, right? You have like a kind of a war in heaven. You have like a war in heaven in Revelation, right? But in reality, that lasts an instant, right? It's not even a war. It's not even a contest. And God dwelling in heaven, it's a distinct kind of heaven from where the angels and where the pagan gods would dwell, by virtue of the fact that God doesn't change, right? He's outside of the universe, and this is the consistent Jew, according to consistent Jew. That was a slip of the tongue. The consistent view of later Judaism, according to Moshe Greenberg. And honestly, I have no reason beyond this kind of weird the reason that Moshe kind of seems to hold it is because he still holds this four-source theory kind of idea of the Old Testament, wherein the religion develops. But the thing is that there's research, and this is in Brant Petree's book on the Old Testament, the introduction to the Old Testament, right, that states very definitively that the Torah is written, you know, roughly when it was supposed to be written. Some people say around 150 years after the date of the biblical date of the Exodus. Some say around the same time, right? Either way, like, this idea of religious development doesn't make sense. So I would just throw that out and say, well, God always was creatio ex nihilo. It always was classical theism. So to say God is in the heavens and that the Old Testament view of the Jews is that's not true. It's far more complicated than that. And I understand I'm kind of rambling because this is a stream and I don't have any notes. But yeah, I hope I'm illuminating people's views. Let's have a look at the comments actually, because I've seen a lot kind of going on. Lots of Deleuze. I've never read Deleuze. If it's anything like Spinoza, I don't agree, because from what I understand, Spinoza is more of a pantheist. Oh, Hume's one is like an epistemological argument, but I don't think he's actually arguing against miracles per se. Like, I would actually reverse it. I would say that the evidence for miracles is actually when they're the most ordinary, right? So it's not like extraordinary claims have extraordinary evidence. It's that extraordinary claims have the most ordinary evidence, right? You want to see evidence for a Eucharistic miracle? Just go look at it, right? It's right there in front of you. Whereas if you're trying to prove a scientific law, if you're trying to prove, say an apple falling from a tree like Newton, right? You want to prove the laws of gravitation. You need to experiment, right? You need multiple instances of this happening. But really, the fact that it's a miracle, it's I suppose in a way it's a one-off. In a way, it's a one-off occurrence, but in another way, it isn't. Like with Eucharistic miracles, it's not, right? But you need less evidence because you just have to look. You can tell when there's a miracle happening in front of you. And like in before people are like, oh, like you can't rely on your senses, blah 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 blah. I mean, you're certainly relying on your senses when you're typing the comment in response to what I've just said, right? How do you know that you're actually pressing down on the keys while you're criticizing my view? How do you know that you're even on my YouTube channel if we're going to start doubting our senses? Now, ultimately, I think that the best reason for trusting your senses is that God is real, basically any way that you slice it, and the classical theistic philosophers prove this, basically. Aristotle makes a good argument. You have Aquinas, you have Edward Fazer. Like, there's no way of getting around it. You have a single truth. You have a single being. You have God. Because there has to be existence, right? And existence by itself is, it just is, right? You can't have an existence that is an abstract object, as we would think about it in our modern way. It has to exist. It has to be the most manifest thing. The mere fact that we have that means that we have God, right? So, and we can conclude through other arguments that God is supremely good, and so therefore God doesn't make things with defects, and therefore, although we have the fault, the human senses are basically reliable. In fact, the mere fact that we can talk about an illusion implies, and we use that with a negative context, and we use it when somebody is deviated and we don't speak about it as if it's the norm, right? Like, the mere fact that we do that shows that by default we trust our senses.
The ascension of Elijah in 2 Kings 2. When Jesus goes to heaven in Acts 1, Luke doesn't picture him just disappearing into another dimension like Narnia, no matter how much N.T. Wright or William Lane Craig wish he had. Rather, we see him ascending up into the clouds, because for Luke, heaven is literally up there, above the circle of the earth. In fact, this was one of the foundational points behind Rudolf Bultmann's whole project of demythologizing the New Testament.
Yeah, but the thing is that when you start looking at this with a classically theistic lens, and you're like, well, yeah, of course, Jesus went to heaven, he ascended up to heaven, right? But why would we need to be able to see him up there? Right? God can do anything he wants. He can just manifest God's body somewhere else. Actually, let's have a look at the passage. I'll be reading from my Duai. So I have it right here in front of me. Okay. Here we go. And when he had said these things, while they looked on, he was raised up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. Wow, like, walking upon the clouds of, like, he is upon the cloud of heaven, up in heaven, right? And while they were beholding him going up to heaven, behold, 2 men stood by them in white garments, who also said, Ye men of Galilee, why stand you looking up to heaven? This Jesus who is taken up from you into heaven shall so come. Wait, as he repeatedly told them, as you have seen him going into heaven. Then they returned to Jerusalem. So he was just received into a cloud, right? And then the angels were like, he's done what he said. That's the extent of it. Like, there's no reason why God couldn't have, stuck him elsewhere. Oh, it's tiresome. Why can't, like, why is God bound by, you know, like, assumptions of position? Why exactly? You know, we're not even bound by that. You're the same man that you were when you were a child, and you were 3 foot then. And now you're like, you know, 5-6 foot. Somewhere around there. Right? You're still the same person, though. Unless you're actually going to unironically believe in the stupid, frankly, physicalistic view of mind. You know. And that's for another video, right? Like, if you want something to read on that, read Immaterial Aspects of Thought by James Ross. And then there's also another paper written by Edward Fazer, which relates that to the work of a logician called Saul Kripke. Right? If you want to deal with that, read that. Right? But I mean, common sense tells you that you're the same person as you were when you were a child. So, but like that aside, right? Why can't he change with positions? Why can't he mess around with positions? He's omnipotent.
As he says in the opening lines of his 1941 manifesto, New Testament and Mythology, quote, "The cosmology of the New Testament is essentially mythical in character. The world is viewed as a 3-storied structure with the earth in the center."
Well, yeah, Bolton's wrong. It's as simple as that. If Bolton is just wrong. Like, there's way more to it than just heaven and earth. There's a lot of nuances to it. You know, it says in the Gospel of John. I remember I was talking to a very close friend of mine's mother, and she was talking about God being spirit, right? And yeah, you know, God is spirit, but he's not spirit in the same way as the angels are. He transcends them. He doesn't change. You know, the angels, they do. You know, some of them rebelled, right? They have a changeability to them. So, you know, just talking as if there's like one heaven is just false, if that's actually what Boltman even holds. And frankly, yeah, actually I won't comment on Boltman. I don't know enough about him to really comment.
The heaven above and the underworld beneath. This, then, is the mythical view of the world that the New Testament presupposes when it presents the event of redemption, which is the subject of its preaching. Unquote. You see, Boltman recognized that the New Testament is so filled with mythology, like this 3-story universe that is so foreign to our understanding of reality.
You know, I wonder if Boltman ever saw a miracle. I really do, because I mean, plenty of people have. You know, it's a fairly common thing in Africa and Asia. You know, we even see them in the West. You know, Padre Pio, like I've said. Blessed Alexandrina da Cosa. You know? You have plenty of miracles going on. You know, I've mentioned someone I know who's seen them himself. You know, you see all kinds of things. It's just a matter of, you know, you see them. It's not like a mythological element. Pah. They just happen. They still happen.
Today, the modern Christian can't accept it as it comes, but...
Okay, my girlfriend, would you like me to call you something a little bit more intense then?
has to demythologize it. And so that's what Boltman tried to do. But this presents a much bigger problem for more traditional Christians who want to hold on to the early church's belief that God literally raised Jesus from the dead. Because you can't...
Well, like, you see, you've just answered your own question, right? How is it that there are all these mythological elements in the in the New Testament, right? And then you have all of these, like, early Christians who hold that it's all literal. You know, people who are around, you know, you actually have a response to this kind of mythological view. I believe it's in the Dialogue with Trypho by Saint Justin Martyr, who was writing in the middle of the 2nd century. If it's not there, it's in the First Apology, right? You have these Christians at the time when the Gospels were written saying that these things aren't mythological, and they had the apostolic deposit. You know, you have other Christian writers, you know, who believed in a literal resurrection, like Tertullian, and you have Saint Irenaeus saying, if you want to prove that you're of the apostolic line, break out the roles and show us which apostle you descend from. Show me the bishops. You know, they have this. They have the apostolic succession, and they have the tradition there, and they're telling you that it's literal, and it was established by the same apostles and companions of the apostles that wrote the Gospels. So, by your own admission, why are you saying that there are all these mythological elements in the Gospels when the successors of the apostles, who received the teaching from the apostles, disagree with you? It would be like going to Shakespeare and talking about Macbeth or something, and saying that, like, really, like, you know, like Macbeth is really like a mythological representation of King Duncan. It is of that level. You're just throwing out how people interpreted the scriptures, who, by the way, descended from the people that wrote them, and just saying, oh, it's just all mythological, by your own admission. Like, how can you consistently interpret a text if you're going to dismiss the tradition which birthed it? You're going to obviously miss the point of the thing. It's like, would I read, I don't know, Stephen Hawking without consulting modern physicists? I'm not a physicist myself. No, because I might misunderstand things. I could say, well, you know, Stephen Hawking is asserting something about the universe when really he could mean something completely different. That's why we have schools and we have traditions. And, you know, some traditions are better than others, right? Like this physicalistic, scientific one is pure nonsense, and the traditional Christian one makes sense. And I've just explained why the scientific one doesn't make sense. And if you continue tuning into my channel, then, you know, hopefully over time the traditional Christian view will make sense. And it isn't the evangelical view, not by any means. It's the Catholic view.
You can't discard the ascension without calling the resurrection itself into question. In the traditional Christian story, the death, resurrection...
Oh, Stephen Hawking's writes for beginners, usually. Okay. I don't know, some big physics man. Let's say I'm reading Einstein directly. Yeah, Euler. Yeah, Euler, someone like that, you know. Or if I wanted to read... Say I wanted to read Hegelian philosophy, and I started directly... I'm trying to think of an orthodox. I can't think of an orthodox thinker who's Hegelian. Let me think of... Yeah, okay. Emanationist views of the Trinity. If I just started with, you know, Saint Basil the Great, right, and I just sort of read him whole cloth, right? There are going to be times when you're reading Basil the Great, or even if you're reading Augustine, right? Like, you're going to need an interpreting factor. You're going to need an interpreter there for some things, right? Because they will say things that are very complicated at times. Okay. I don't know about him. Yeah, we'll continue.
Ascension and the second coming of Jesus all fit together in a very clear sequence, each one implying the others. And so you can't take one of them out of the sequence without calling the rest of the sequence into question. And this, I think, is why apologists prefer...
Well, I mean, I don't see why that follows. I mean, sure, you know, like these things being stacked on top of one another, they certainly reinforce the fact that Jesus, you know, fulfills the Old Testament. But could Jesus have simply died? Yeah, could have happened. It could have happened theoretically. You know, could Jesus have died and risen and nothing else? Sure. You know, could Jesus have just ascended? Like Elijah? Sure. You know, like, obviously I'm speaking here hypothetically. I'm not sure what he's really getting at here, to be honest.
To simply not talk about it. They're just doing what we all tend to do, counting the hits and ignoring the misses.
Or they're just like, no, you go for the truth at every single instance, and if someone gets something wrong, right, you criticize them brutally, right? Like, you know, Protestants are my fellow Christians. That doesn't stop me criticizing them. Like their ecclesiology doesn't make any sense. It's not historical. You Orthodox the same, like similar way. Even worse for the Orthodox in a way. It's like, there's the hits and the misses and all, like. No, you criticise an argument when it's wrong, and it's the same with arguments for God. If there's a bad argument for God, you criticise it.
And by all accounts, the Ascension is a pretty big mess.
I think we've shown that I disagree with that. Okay. Am I doing under a waterfall? Sorry. Right, sorry, it's the, oh, is it fine? Oh, it was alright the whole time. Yeah, I know it's rhetoric. I know it, I mean, it's just what it is, right? So, okay, so I'm going to take questions now. If you guys want to ask questions in the chat. It's even worse for you. It's... Yeah, if you just have questions, just ask. Also, don't insult the guy. Remember, you have to confess that as well, and he's in the likeness and image of God. Like, you see, the thing that really irritates me about just atheism generally, right, is that it's just so, like, I was atheist for years, and someone introduced me to the philosophical arguments for the existence of God. I really accepted, the contingency argument. It just made sense to me, but I didn't see why it would be God. And, someone explained that to some extent, and, it just makes sense. And then you start finding all of this stuff about miracles, like contemporary miracles, and stuff that have scientific studies on them, and you start finding, like actual scientific studies, not just like quack. You have doctors studying these things. You have thousands of people at some of them, right? You have like the mass hallucination thing. Like, they'll say, oh, like Jesus rising from the dead, oh, that's a mass hallucination. Oh, Fatima, that's a mass hallucination, right? So, like, let's take Fatima, right? If Fatima is such a mass hallucination, how come people from ships miles away who had no idea about the miracle still saw it? Where's the hallucination there? I read somebody who said that Fatima was guys just staring at the sun for too long and then freaking out. I mean, come on. Come on, like, you don't have independent witnesses without the previous backstory seeing it if they're just staring at the sun. It's just cringe. Okay, let's have a look at the other chats. How do I get rich quick? Well, you have to be very lucky. Or not lucky, as the case may be. I think it was, even a secular, I think he's secular anyway, he was like nominal, I think he's nominally Eastern Orthodox, actually. Nassim Taleb says, millionaires are lucky, but billionaires are extremely unlucky. Right? And he's right to some extent. Although I'd say that in a way the millionaires are unlucky as well. And so it depends on the situation though. Right? Getting rich can be the worst thing that happens to you. Because there could be lifestyle creep if you're not careful, and that's what will destroy you. Is coffee good for you? Depends on who you are. Jokes aside, what's your opinion on God willing all religions? I can't wrap my head around it. Well, God permits all the religions that exist, and so he has something in mind for them. That doesn't mean that they're the true religion. One of the things that I think comes out of heresy that's a really good fruit is that it makes orthodoxy more clear. Right? You have the Protestant Reformation, and then you have Trent, and Trent is an amazing council. It outlines all of these things. It gives a final stamp to like a set canon of the scripture. It doesn't mean it can't be expanded, but the books that are canonized firmly right there. Before then, it was relying on previous precedent from local councils and from church fathers. You have the affirmation of the indissolubility of marriage, generally speaking. At Trent, with some exceptions for some, like Greek. I think it was Greek, like Eastern Catholics with Eastern Orthodox that were under the Venetians. Like they were still permitted to do economia although this was repudiated by the church, and the orthodox view is that marriage is absolutely indissoluble. You have the affirmation of all kinds of different things. And that's one of the things that came out of Protestantism. And we're going to see the same thing with this scientism. And we're already seeing it. We had the same thing with the biblical critics of the 19th century. We had the same... you wouldn't have all of this biblical archaeology and stuff if people weren't interested, right? And it's certainly helped the biblical case. Like, I can, in full conscience, hold the traditional view of Scripture right now, basically. Right? There are a couple of things here and there that I'm not quite so sure about, but they need more digging. But basically, with the current evidence, you can essentially hold a very traditional view of Scripture. What was the question originally? Yeah, that was the willing of all religions, right? Like, another one. This is one of my, little pet ideas, and I of course could be wrong, it's just a guess, right? I have a feeling that the communist revolutions in China were permitted to wipe out the traditional religions there, and it would introduce a more Western mindset, which would make it more marketable for religion. Right? It created a sort of a spiritual vacuum, and it also accustomed the Chinese people to a more Western way of thinking. And so the same with these religions. You have all manner of different religions there to harden up, either to, in a certain sense, sort of maybe place people who wouldn't have been exposed to Christianity very much to a more Christian way of thinking, or more one that's in line with eternal law, which is Christianity. Or you have them there to basically shore up Christianity as it is. That's largely my view. Is Nietzsche a good critic of Christian casuistry? What do you mean, like the moral theological school, or what do you mean by casuistry? Because I wasn't aware that Nietzsche wrote about that. If you mean moral theology, I'm pretty sure Simone Weil. I don't know who Simone Weil is. Who do you think has a better shot at salvation? A militant Satanist or a career lawyer with zero interest in religion? Honestly, I'd say the militant Satanist. Alright, because you have people like Blessed Bartolo Longo, who were very into the occult. And through that, they found the way, to Christianity, right? You have Augustine. Augustine was a Manichaean. He was a form of Gnostic. And through his wrestlings with Manichaeism and other things, he eventually became a bishop and became one of the single greatest church fathers. Yeah, Pascal, man, he was mad in his writings. That makes more sense than saying God wants you not to be a Christian. Thanks. Yeah. Like God, when He permits something, that doesn't mean it's necessarily good, right? Like we have serial killers. Does that mean that God thinks they're good? No, of course not. He puts them there for another reason. Thoughts on the papacy of JP2? I've heard of people that who have said that they think that JP2 will be a doctor of the church in future because of his writings in the theology of the body. But really, I don't know much about him. But he seems like a nice enough guy. Like, I'm much more into... Like, do I really have, like, a set time period of interest? That is the thing. Like, I certainly don't read... I read some modern stuff, but not that much. Right, like, I've read... You see, that's the thing. Where have I read the most? I don't know. But, yeah, I don't really have much of a thought on JP2. But I like the guy. Wow, we've got 19 people watching. Let's see. How do you feel about video games as recreation? I only really play them when I have free time and my friends are around. I mean, yeah, they're fine. As long as they're done in moderation. There's nothing intrinsically evil about them. It's about time and place. And if you find them relaxing. This is something I've actually been having an issue with, right? I actually might ask. Yeah, I'm going to ask the audience this. I'm having issues finding ways to relax because, like, I've got video games, but they don't really relax me that much. And really, I'm reading all the time, so I think it would be a bit weird if I were to relax with a book. And I'm trying to find other hobbies. Like, part of me's thinking of going back to historical wargaming. But, there's the question of, money investment. So, thoughts on, that'd be interesting, guys. Give me good, interesting, tactile hobbies. My brother is bugging me with questions of hell. He doesn't think it's fair that God allows infinite punishment for finite actions. Well, the thing is that they aren't finite actions. When you sin, you're offending God, right? And God is infinite, so therefore you're offending an infinite thing. So it's going to be, and that's not a very good argument. Right? The better argument is that really hell is the default. Hell is the default place where everyone goes, and God can choose to save you, and give you salvific grace and take you to heaven. Right? You aren't owed heaven. Hell isn't like a place. Hell isn't the place that is where the bad people go. Hell is the place where you go if you don't have God's grace when you die. Regardless of your works. Or what you think your works are. So, if you're going to offend God, if you're going to sit there and offend God, then of course He can just deprive you of the grace. Right? And then you just go to hell. That's how you pose it, Heaven is a reward, not a default. Oh, that's why you... yeah. Yeah. The person who phoned me up is in the chat. What do you think of Battaglia? I haven't... that name rings a bell, but I can't remember who he is. Are you going to make a video on the Divine Office? I said I would. I might do it on another YouTube channel. I think I'll do it on the YouTube channel, actually. But yeah, I'll do a video on that. You should go out more and take up a hobby like boxing. I might try it. I did try it once. But it's, again, a question of money and time. He doesn't think existence is good. Cringe. Well, what, would he rather be dead? Does he think nothingness is good? Have you ever tried painting? No, I haven't. I might try it, actually. That's a good idea. Chamomile tea. I was in this, I really like... I might buy an Earl Grey, actually. I really like Earl Grey. I had it the other week, and it was really nice. What do you think of the accusation made on 4chan quite often that, quote, base tradcaths want to use Christianity as justification for their political beliefs and that contrarianism is the motivation? I can't speak for any individual person, but I do feel like a lot of people need to let their political views take a back seat and just put God first. Like, I can see that. I can see why someone would be attracted to a religion because it's based. But you don't believe it because it's based, you believe it because it's true. And, there's a real question there. Like, I was listening to Bishop Barron a few months ago. Hi. And he was talking about using beauty first as a way of, evangelizing. Right? Because, to use words from another person, who cares if it's true or if it's ugly? Right? Who cares if it's, if it's good, if it's something hard to do, right? And, that which is beautiful is, I think Aquinas defines it as something like that which, when it's looked upon or it's observed in some way, it pleases, right? And you need that to kind of soften things up. Like, I remember in the time when I was deist, I hadn't quite become Catholic yet, I was listening to a lot of Eastern chant, and I found that just beautiful. So, maybe that's what they mean by based. Maybe you need something like that, a more fleshly motivation. And then from there, they develop into believing it's true. I don't know, that's just me sort of spieling a little bit. But yeah. Did anyone else have any other questions? Because it's actually boiling hot in this room and I don't want to switch the fan on. And that's probably why I've been a bit incoherent at parts of the stream, because it is very hot in this room. And oh man, the windows are fogging up. It's hot enough that it's fogging up. I think Tradcasts just have a very strong attachment to tradition. Well, I mean, we should have a strong attachment to tradition. Like, it's part of the when tradition properly understood. You know, that's part of the deposit of faith of Scripture. I don't think it's about contrarianism at all. No, I could definitely see, like, with some people, it's contrarianism. Have you read French authors like Bernanos or Huysmans? Like, French Catholic authors? I've read A.C. Sertalanger. I've read Garrigou Lagrange. I've read a little bit of Pascal, but he's a very Jansenist. I'm not keen on him. Who else have I read that's French? No one really jumps out to me, actually. Can you read Latin? I can read some Latin, yeah, I can read quite a bit of Latin. I'm not like a world-class Latinist. Like, I would really struggle with classical Latin, and I still sometimes struggle with things like I often struggle with things like the Vulgate and with easier things. But yeah, like, if I have a dictionary right there, maybe, like, yeah, I can make my way around Latin. There are some things I struggle with though. Like, I really need to work on the subjunctive, because I never really worked on the subjunctive, and I need to work on participles. Right, those are the things that really are striking me at the moment. I can't believe I'm defending Tradcats. Yeah, I said I was probably gonna make a video on that mongoose. Yeah, I will make a video on the Divine Office at some point. Help with purity spiraling. What aspect of purity spiraling? Do you think Thomism is an inflexible metaphysics system? No, not at all. I think generally speaking, it's basically true. Yeah, actually, yeah, True Trad Wifey makes a really good point. Regular reception of the sacraments will change your life for the better. Like, it will simply make your life better. Like, True Trad Waifu will be able to attest the difference between me receiving on Sunday and me receiving, more frequently. I don't have a view on Alfred North Whitehead. I'm not really sure who that is. Yeah, like, my life completely changed when I received the sacraments, right? If you want a purity spiral, another thing, a lot of people, they aren't in error because they actually get something objective. I mean, they do get something objectively wrong, but they don't get it wrong because they're objectively in the wrong. They take some truth and they exaggerate it massively, right? So skepticism comes out of massively exaggerating people's ability to reckon the reality around them, for example. Or, you get Arianism. Actually, Arianism is not a very good example, because, like, Arianism ends up in a position where he's neither really God nor man. You have Monophysitism, which overemphasizes the divinity of Christ at the expense of the human essence. Do I like Scott Hahn? Yeah, I do like Scott Hahn a lot. I've read his book on his book First Society, and I want to go through. I should go through more of his stuff. I really like Scott Hahn. Thoughts on the Agrapha? Floating dominical sayings not preserved in the canonical Gospels. I mean, yeah, there are some in First Clement. Yeah, it really depends on where you get them from in Nicodemus. Right, it depends on the source. Like, you can say, like, a lot of people have this view of, like, the early Christian heretics as having, like, insights or something, but the thing is that a lot of them fail very fundamentally, and so I really doubt it. Right, so, for example, the Ebionites. Right, the Ebionites basically still followed the old law, and they viewed Jesus as, like, a very good man, I think. I'm not actually sure on that second thing, right? But the thing is that misses the point of the prophets, right? Jeremiah explicitly says there will be a new covenant not according to that of your fathers on Sinai, right? There's a very serious error right there. And, the same with the polytheists that embrace Jesus as well. St. Justin Martyr, sure, some of the fathers are okay. Clement of Alexandria isn't actually considered a saint in the West. So that one I'm a little bit more tentative about. Yeah, I have never seen. I've heard of one. I think there's one moral theologian who comments on piracy. Right. My gut instinct says generally it is. Right, because you're violating the law, and you should probably follow those laws insofar as they're unjust. But this isn't something I've really dug into, right? So, I know another person, I know other people who have other views. Some people will read, the introduction to a book and they'll say, oh, it can be used for purposes beyond commercial. Now, whether that allows piracy, I'm not sure. But, that's something that needs to be dug into, really. Ever want to do a video on the Manichaeans? Maybe. I might. Pope. The Pope. Pope Francis, right? He's canonizing. He's not canonizing. He's making Saint Irenaeus of Lyon a doctor of the Church. I'm up for doing a video on him. I really like him. I've got his Against Heresies. And he was responding to the Gnostics. Not the Manichaeans, but the Gnostics. I think that non-religious traditions can be ditched out of hand because perfection is like a pencil lead being sharpened to a point where its tip is like that of an atom or molecule. I don't think they can. Because, you see, when you're living in the faith, you're always going to be in interactions with secular things. And a lot of the moral laws aren't about intrinsic goods and evils. They're often a question of degree. So, and you have to acknowledge that the degree depends on the circumstances around you, and that would include secular culture. So I'm not sure I agree with that. Did I say Clement of Alexandria? I meant Clement of Rome. Yeah, I mean First Clement. Not Clement of Alexandria. If I said that, I'm a little bit tired. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, Nicodemus. But yeah, I'll check the DMs afterwards. Oh, that one. Yeah. Are there any major Christian works that are in reaction or in contact with postmodernism and post-structuralist thinkers? I would be very shocked if there aren't, but I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. Do I like Origen? I mean, he influences Gregory of Nyssa and a lot of the Greek fathers in a very profound way. But would I take everything he says seriously? No. But he also records other agraphical sayings like the following. For he says, "Have you seen your brother? You have seen God, your God." Well, I mean, in a certain sense, we could reconcile that as true. You know, like, I think the key thing with the agraphia is that they have to not, like, if we're going to consider them in any way, first of all, I don't think they're scripture, necessarily, because we don't know for certain if they're real. But when we're considering them on, like, our own basis, like, we have to consider it with the rest of the Gospels. Gandalf, that, yeah. Go over Augustine a little bit, Gandalf. Alright, I think I've been streaming for long enough. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll probably be on Settler's channel tomorrow. If not, because it might be delayed again. Oh yeah, I'll try and get videos out at some point. Well, I'll see how it goes. You know, I should make videos more regularly, but I've really fallen off. But yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. I'll see you guys later, and goodbye.